This analysis defines the absolute spatial perimeter of the subject, a single, continuous, 300-mile closed-loop track mapping the journey out of and back into the Chicago grid. To maintain geometric focus, we remove all narrative excess. Faces are deleted. Architecture is rendered as flat geometry. Participants are reduced to colored point nodes, a cyan chevron for the fugitive, an amber cluster for the pursuit, and a red node for the threat. This corner readout is the D9 telemetry HUD. It tracks the spatial distance between these nodes in real time. In this space, the fluctuating numeric distance between moving vectors is the only data that matters. The constraints begin by contrasting the high vertex density of a grand ballroom against the rigid right-angle intersections of the modern Yasla townhouse geometry. The interior architecture of the townhouse resolves into three geometric components: a transparent glass catwalk, a black steel spline staircase, and a Boolean subtracted pool cavity. The initial failure occurs when the cyan and red nodes share the stair mesh. The glass plane breaks, displacing the cyan chevron, and the distance readout immediately climbs. The system responds by shrinking the architectural boundaries around the fugitive, from the interrogation room to the courtroom, and finally into a 9-square-meter cell. Legal custody is the mathematical reduction of the gap distance to zero. The fugitive node is locked inside a sequence of nested structural boxes. Transit is a bounded kinetic state, an 11-meter steel prism moving along a highway datum line. An internal kinetic force disrupts the trajectory. The prism completes 2.5 revolutions down a 30-degree embankment before coming to rest across two rails, exactly 1.435 meters apart. The incoming vector is a 3-unit train consist, moving at 18 meters per second. The gap drops to zero at intersection. At 10% speed, the kinematics are clear. Momentum vectors radiate from the 90-degree shear plane, dividing the bus shell. The simulation separates the environment into two render layers. Layer 1 calculates the rigid body physics of the train wreck. Layer 2 tracks the running spline of the cyan node sprinting ahead of the locomotive. This intersection of conflicting spatial equations shatters the nested boxes of custody, forcing the fugitive node back into open topography. Moving into the low polygon forest, a second prisoner node splits the handcuffed torus and the two splines diverge. The pursuit operates as a series of expanding concentric search radii. These amber rings intersect and trigger structural node targets in sequence: farmhouse, henhouse, outhouse, lighting them up as the perimeter grows. Note the geographical anomaly. While the coordinates are cited as Illinois, the terrain contour lines explicitly map to North Carolina. At the hospital dock, the vehicle rule takes effect. An idling slate-colored van inherits the cyan color the moment the node boards the vehicle. Survival is defined by velocity. The moving node must keep its gap value ahead of the outermost expanding search ring. The aerial threat projects a 10-meter rotor disc onto the mountain road, a cone of influence the fugitive cannot leave. The interior of this structure contains a hidden architectural constraint: a branching network of tunnels that match the 12-meter-deep freight strata of Chicago. The structural data sheet for Cheoah Dam: concrete gravity type, 69 meters tall, releasing 158 cubic meters of water per second. This elevation view tracks the ballistic descent. The readout rotates 90 degrees to measure vertical space: 69 meters, 3.7 seconds, and an entry velocity of 37 meters per second. The 3.7-second plunge is an absolute spatial refusal, using the vector of gravity to exit the loop when the gap hits zero. The exit velocity of the river becomes a dashed vector line, representing 300 miles of inferred travel back to the city. The map contains ghost geometry, massive structural spaces like Meigs Field that existed in 1993 but have since been erased. These localized artifacts of the tarmac and parked aircraft now exist only as dashed lines in the historical data. Because time constantly edits the physical grid, this simulation serves as the final, immutable structural survey of these spaces. Re-entering Chicago, the story turns vertical. The city is a 5-layer orthographic section, from the elevated tracks at +6 meters down to the freight tunnels at -12. The acoustic trace computes the gap through sound. Spheres of noise from the elevated track and bridge steel intersect a payphone prism, returning an exact 6-block distance readout. The records repository is located behind this Beaux-Arts colonnade. Inside, the master object, the prosthetic arm, is held in a sortable record stack. A near miss occurs in the City Hall stair core. The cyan and amber nodes pass each other separated by exactly 2.7 meters of z-space. The Fugitive dissolves the cyan node into a live crowd simulation down Dearborn Street, causing the tracking signal to drop. The only figure in the simulation treated as a solid modeled object is this 50-foot Core 10 steel sculpture. The residential grid in Pullman is composed of repetitive brick row house modules. The Fugitive node enters the coordinates of the threat's own home. The acoustic trace beam now runs its 14-second path backward, landing precisely on its own origin point. By penetrating the threat's structural coordinates, the Fugitive flips the mathematical power dynamic. The hunter is now the one being measured. On the Wells Street tracks, the threat maintains matched velocity, tailing the cyan node at a constant distance and speed. Two simultaneous coordinate systems, the exterior spline rushing at 24.6 meters per second and the car's constrained internal floor taper. The handcuff torus closes, locking the red node to a stanchion. The readout transitions to fixed to frame. Kinetic mastery involves weaponizing the architecture, using the world's velocity to permanently neutralize an opponent's mobility. The journey terminates at the Stevens Hotel, a 25-story Beaux-Arts mass representing the final vertical constraint. The final descent moves through the building's skeletal layers, the ballroom banquet grid, the machine room, and an elevator cab dropping at 4 meters per second. In the sub-level laundry matrix, the densest machine geometry in the film, the last red node is rendered static. At street level, the bounding torus opens. The cyan and amber polylines are now parallel, occupying the same vector at the same speed. The telemetry stabilizes. Once the vectors align and the loop closes at its origin, the spatial conflict is resolved.